During the course of this program, you will hear some pounding and beeping from time to time, as the Fountain Street Fine Art Gallery is conveniently located right next door to a boxing school. In the spring of 2013, local artist Roy Perkinson invited two of his friends, Andrew Haines and Greg Hines, to join him in an exhibition at Fountain Street Fine Art called Sightlines. The reception for this exhibition filled the Fountain Street Fine Art Gallery to its limit. As usual, there was plenty of food and drink, and the atmosphere was enhanced by some lovely acoustic music. But of course, the highlight of this event, outside of the work itself, is the opportunity each viewer is afforded to meet and chat with this very talented trio and get some wonderful insight into the work on display from the artists themselves. And now, here's Roy Perkinson.
We have assembled in this exhibition, Sightlines, the work of three artists, myself included, and I've brought together with my work two other artists, one painter and one photographer, whom I've known for years and I've really admired their work for years. Andrew Haines, a painter, and Greg Hines, a photographer. And I think it's really interesting to see how our work speaks to each other and how it seems to relate one thing to the other.
The gallery's co-owners, Marie Picard-Craig and Sherry Clinton, put the show together ever mindful of the connections between the work of each artist.
So the two of them began to sort of see combinations, which was fascinating to watch. And those of you who have been involved in putting on exhibitions know what I mean. When you start to see these connections and how things do start to talk with each other, it's great to see.
And now photographer Greg Hines will talk about his work and some of the experiences that brought him to this exhibit.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to be invited. It's nice to be in such company. And it's for a photographer, it's always lovely to see the work mixed up with paintings and works on paper. So I picked a group of things that are all from the outskirts of Paris.
In the Zone, just outside the wall that fortified Paris during World War II, there were shanty towns controlled by the military, which remained throughout the 1950s. The fortifications, as they've been called, have since been replaced by the Boulevard Périphérique. Greg made his first visit in 2006.
The fortifications were first starting to be taken down, actually under the Vichy regime. They may have figured that since the Germans were already there, they were so delighted with it, like why did they need a wall? So that's sort of where it started, and then the boulevard itself was put in the late 60s, and it was a matter of considerable controversy because it was, again, another one of these sort of Haussmannian type of urban redesign. A great deal of housing was taken out, and the boulevard was put in. The other side of it was that there was a lot of recreational facilities were put in along the boulevard, and so in fact, there's one of them here of the football field where this is fairly typical. There are football fields, there are swimming pools, there are all kinds of things that almost kind of line both sides of the boulevard as you go around it. And So my first awareness of this area actually came long before I actually went to Paris from seeing a Godard film, which was done in the early 70s, where he sort of takes as his subject people living in this area and their response to the kind of this increasing sort of commercialization of their environment. And the film constantly shows construction cranes and so the dislocated life of the people who are living in this area and really being exposed for the first time to the kind of hyper-consumerism that we now live in all the time, but which at that point for France was very new. And then the other sort of photographic predecessor to this work that I only became aware of quite a bit later was Robert Doisneau, who made the famous photograph of the lovers kissing in the middle of Paris. Doisneau actually lived in the suburbs, in the banlieue, and did a book in the 40s or 50s, which was simply entitled Banlieue. In France now, it's become a kind of loaded word, and when you say to someone that you were in the banlieue, and they say, oh, you know, they kind of look at you and they say, well, where did you go? And you say, well, I was in Neuilly. And Neuilly technically is a banlieue, it's a suburb, but it's a very elegant place. I mean, when you get off the thing, really, you look around, and there are villas there, it's just beyond belief, you know, it's incredibly wonderful. And they say, oh, well, no, that's not really a banlieue. And, but it is a banlieue. I mean, it is a suburb. But now it's become a kind of a loaded word that means sort of an area that is, shall we say, not doing so well. But my impulse for going out there was basically just curiosity. And Paris is a small city, so wherever you are, you know, it's just a half an hour on a bus or something, and you're at the edge. And I just went out to sort of see what it was all about, because this was sort of the period when you were hearing about, you know, people burning cars and so on and so forth. And as they say, they run the gamut, you know. So I've been in places where cars, in fact, were burning, but it's not a hostile environment at all, or at least, you know, if it is, I'm not aware of it. So I'm out there every year. I try to get out there for a few days, and I basically just get off the bus and walk around, and I'm just trolling for photographs.
I think one of the things that has always drawn me to your work as well as Andy's work is that it's one thing to be combing the beach and just kind of looking at it, but it takes a special eye to say, that's a pearl. What do you think, Andy?
Oh, well, I wish
He's out.
I wish I had such an exotic climb. I think for me, I mean, I'm always looking for formal relationships and things. I'm looking around all the time, looking for something to do. And I do work from photography. Originally, I always painted on site and plein air and painted, and was very particular about being in front of the object that I would paint. But that's 20-some years ago, and children and all made all that impossible. So I spent a good 4 years of not doing anything, and then realized that I had to make some changes. So I discovered the camera was very useful to remember things for me. So I would work with from photographs, and like Greg said, I troll for images too. And the other thing, besides just the formal relationship, how the light is hitting whatever, a wall, or there's a piece of sky, or there's a bunch of interesting power lines that might be used for something, it's the layers of things that I see. Having had the same job, same house, same everything for a long period of time, the thing that's the most surprising is how much things change and how quickly that happens, and how things will be completely forgotten, and you'll be talking to somebody that's only been there for a year or two, and they don't remember whatever happened in either the neighborhood I live in or the neighborhoods that I pass through every day. Buildings are sort of a collaborative effort, and painting is totally a singular effort. And unlike making a photograph where you can kind of just, you take it and you can think about it later, you know, take a photograph and then walk it. Anyway, you can take many photographs in a day. A painting takes a certain amount of time. So I get to think about the thing I'm painting for a long period of time as I'm painting it, and you'll notice things about it and thinking like how there may have used to be something here, or I'll know in my own mind how there used to be something there and then changed it. I mean, a really obvious example would be the old State House and that painting behind us.
Painting behind you.
Which has all of Boston that grew up around it. And at the opening, I was telling someone when I first moved to Boston, or my first trip to Boston, I saw the old State House. I grew up with Philadelphia being my model of the city, and then had nothing but Georgian architecture throughout the city. Boston had the old State House surrounded by skyscrapers, and they're like, yeah, that seemed a little disappointing to me. But so I've thought about that for years, and that was a trip to a lawyer's office where I had an opportunity to snap a really fast photograph, and that's more than probably 4 years ago that happened. So it's an image that I've been mulling over in my mind before I actually made the painting.
Mark Fernside was talking about painting in the Southwest, and that she started her painting from one side and began to progress to the right side. And as she did that, of course, the sunlight changed what she was doing. And so I all of a sudden realized light is something I hadn't really thought about, the changing light when you are painting or when you're in charge of how, as you've said, I think, how you want the light to be. But then you've got the natural light that changes all the time.
Well, that's the wonderful thing about painting in situ from life, and is that it keeps moving. And so the idea you started out with, 20 minutes or 40 minutes later is gone, and you have to go with what's in front of you, and then it keeps changing all along. And the beauty of painting in the studio from a photograph, well, it's canned sunshine, so it's right there.
Your observation earlier about how rapidly the physical world
changes.
is changing, and I'm constantly amazed by this. So my prototypical photograph is supposed is something like this. You could say there's almost always a tree in front of a building, and I can tell you that sometimes I'm walking around and I realize, but wait a minute, I'm right near the place where I did the such and such thing, and so I'll keep walking, another half mile or whatever, and I come to where, like that one. And it's like, I can guarantee you, it's almost every time, either the tree's gone or the building's gone. It is just astonishing at how fast, whatever, and of course, light, as you say, is never the same twice. But somebody named Henry Wessel, who does wonderful work, spoke about going out and trying to have soft eyes. And I think that's a great phrase, and I try to think, okay, you're standing somewhere, and of course it's like the first time I parked in the parking lot, back here, I did the same thing. I got out and I said, oh wow, I gotta come back. It's terrific. Yeah. But it's like, I'm standing somewhere and I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's a photograph here somewhere, and I'm just trying to be receptive.
That's a great phrase. So that's what he meant, the receptivity. Soft eyes. So there's a 19th century writer, French writer on landscape painting. I wish I could remember his name, but one of the famous kind of things that was made the rounds among artists in the 19th century. He talks about landscape painting, and he basically says, well, if you don't finish your painting in an hour or so, forget it, because everything will have changed so much. And by and large, I find that that's actually still valid. I don't know if you agree with that, but sometimes it can be 10 minutes. A couple of years ago, I guess, Gene and I went to Monhegan and stayed for about a week. It's a dangerous place, though. If you're not careful, you trip over somebody's easel, you can break a leg. There's so many artists there. But anyway, I took my pastels in this case, and they're very efficient for working on location. I like pastels for that reason, just in general anyway. And one day I'd been out painting, came back in the late afternoon, put all my stuff inside this little place, a little apartment we rented, which was right on the edge of the water there next to the fish house. And I said, well, I'm going to go out and do some more drawing. I'll be back in a little bit. I stepped out into the porch, and the wind was whipping up, and the light was amazing. There were these clouds that were whipping across the sky, and this backlighted little island. If any of you have been there at Monhegan, there's a little island hardly anybody ever talks about, Manana, not Manana, but Manana, right across from Monhegan. And we were looking at this, we were facing this from our apartment, and I saw the sun coming from behind it, and the water was choppy and everything. Well, I came right back in, and Gene said, what's wrong? I said, change of plans. I grabbed all my pastel stuff, put it on the porch, I had a heck of a time taping my paper down to the drawing board because the wind was so strong. Got my coat back on because it was cold, but I set to work, and I think in maybe about 45 minutes, the light must have changed umpteen different times, but I kept trying to sort of capture the something I saw a few minutes ago and recreate that, and oh, wait a minute, there's another idea. And, you know, it's like a high wire act, but it's exhilarating too. It's great fun. Ages ago in art school, my old painting teacher told me that, said, the thing you'll find maddening, Roy, about painting is that every time you add a color, it makes something else happen somehow or other, and you've got to get it all to work together. And I often think of that guy. I think, you know, if I could see him, I'd say, you know, you're really right.
There was more discussion about light before a brief but interesting comment about working with watercolor.
Who's that guy, John Singer Sargent? He was an artist, I think. Said something at one point, watercolor is making the best of an emergency. Well, it is. It's really a great way of putting it, because timing is so important. You know, as you know, I mean, you are a huge fan of doing watercolor yourself, and the timing of how dry is something, that determines on how the next layer of color or addition of color is going to behave. Is it going to sit there? Is it going to bleed? Is it going to bleed enormously or not? And of course, how dry the paper is depends on things you have no control over. Humidity, breeze, wind, whatever, you know, all sorts of sunlight, all sorts of things. You know, it just makes you think differently.
The audience got a chance to stretch their legs while the artists took the discussion a bit closer to the work. Once they settled in, an audience member asked about the presence, or the lack thereof in the case of this exhibit, of people.
But for me, one of the things I sort of feel is that there is one person associated with each of the works. It's you looking at it, and I want you to have that feeling that it's you who is seeing this. So there's a person of one, at least, you know, but really just one person.
I got that. I thought perhaps that was the intent, part of the intent.
You might want to speak to this.
Yes, please.
As soon as you put a person into an image, it becomes about what the man in the picture is doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's good. And the other thing, especially with painting, it becomes about likeness too. So the two things you end up talking about, like, well, you know, the nose is a little funny.
Yeah.
Famous Sargent quote on that, which I can only misremember. But
So a portrait is a painting with which something is wrong with the mouth.
Exactly. So that's sort of the reason behind that. It's not a reason not to include figures, but it does become, as soon as the figure's involved, then it's like whatever that person's doing, you kind of have to deal with that idea, because then it becomes about whatever they happen to be doing, and that's a different political thing. Where I think landscape painting is actually very much abstract painting, or abstract painting evolves directly out of landscape painting. And so even though my paintings might be very specific and very realistic, it's really about shapes and lines, and where you can put a different texture on top of something else, and creating the illusion of space in a painting. Like this painting has a wonderful illusion of space. And for me, any painting comes to life when I get the illusion of space in a two-dimensional plane. And it's just fun to look at that. And usually it's just two colors butting up against each other, like Roy said, and that changes how things perceive.
Boy, looking at yours with the lights that are changing, then that could have been a green light. It probably was. You may have seen it green, yellow, red, green, yellow, red. Maybe somebody, I get the feeling that these are not empty of people. That there's somebody who has just gone across or just has gone by, that there are...
Well, I think all three of us are kind of drawn to landscapes that in some way have evidence of the activity of people, even if the people aren't there directly. You know, that, there's an implication of some activity. You don't just kind of sit around and kind of wait for lightning to strike.
Right.
You make time, and you've got to figure out how to make time.
Well, lightning strikes when you're at the easel.
Yes,
Lightning strikes because you're already there with
right.
a camera or whatever.
After the discussion, Andrew Haines shared a brief bio.
I paint mostly in acrylics and other waterborne materials, and have been painting since sometime when I was in high school, a long time ago now. And grew up in the Philadelphia area and went to the Tyler School of Art in Temple University's art school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I moved to Boston in the mid-1980s and have been painting Boston for the most part ever since.
Next, Roy Perkinson talks about 3 of the works which you might have seen when you first entered the gallery.
One of the paintings you'll see first off when you come into the gallery is this wonderful painting by Andrew Haines. And Andy Haines explained to me a while back that it's something that he was doing in the Mission Hill district of Boston. He roams around there quite a lot. He lives in Jamaica Plain, as does my other friend Greg Hines. And Andy is quite adept at finding wonderful subjects to deal with in his paintings throughout the Jamaica Plain and Boston area. And one of the things I particularly loved about this painting is the wonderful sort of opposition that he's done here of these slate blue-gray colors in the foreground here, and this sort of superstructure of a group of girders that perhaps have to do with train tracks, set of train tracks there, and this wonderful kind of reddish hue of the building, and punctuated by these brilliant touches of orange on these just ordinary trash cans sitting off to one side, offset again by this beautiful slate gray-blue sky. Just a wonderful combination of colors. When Sherry Clinton and Marie Craig, who are the co-owners of Fountain Street Fine Art, hugged the show, they found interesting connections between all of our works, and they particularly liked this assortment here. This is one of my paintings that shows a street scene in late February, just around the corner on Fountain Street, or just off of Fountain Street. This is actually Route 135. And over here is a little traffic light that marks the beginning of Fountain Street, which goes on around the corner and leads to where our studio building is. One of the things that really appealed to me about this particular moment is this changeableness and the fleeting qualities of pinks and sort of purple colors in the sky here as the sun was setting, and this these brilliant lights that are little signs on this restaurant that's just around the corner. And I had a lot of trouble trying to execute this lower right foreground here, trying to suggest what these piles of snow looked like at this moment, some of which had already begun to melt and created these sort of puddles out here, which was just a wonderful way of getting having an opportunity to show some of the reflecting light bouncing up from that incredible sky, sunset. Related to that too, or at least Marie and Sherry thought it was a wonderful connection to see this photograph by Greg Hines next to this painting of mine, as well as Andy's painting. And this is a very evocative photograph that Greg did in Paris. All of the photographs in this show are ones that he did over a period of years on the outskirts of Paris. Now, this is not the Paris one thinks of as kind of the romantic, classic kind of Paris. It's little odd corners of Paris that one might not ordinarily ever go to. One night, late at night, when he was coming back from doing some photography around in a certain location on the outskirts of Paris, he just happened to be walking past this bank, which is late at night. You can see these red and dark, almost black signs here, neon signs lighted up that just sort of punctuate the night and give a kind of eerie, almost a film noir quality to this scene. I was telling somebody the other day that with this curved street here and the nighttime set, it reminds me so much of that incredible Woody Allen movie, Midnight in Paris. I just had the feeling that car that was featured in the movie is just going to come roaring around the corner here at any moment.
Finally, Roy talks about a few of his paintings.
This painting is something that is the result of working on this same motif over a period of several years, actually. This is an area just south, some miles from Dallas. And one evening, as we were driving along the highway, I actually saw this scene looming up in my rear view mirror. And I just thought, wow, this is just amazing. It just seemed to me to cry out to be somehow converted into a painting. And so I literally turned the car around and pulled over so I could look back down the road that we had just driven along. And I was just mesmerized by the way lights of passing cars, and you can kind of tell if you look closely that there must be a car off to the left that you can't see that's coming along in this direction, or will be before long, because its headlights are catching these brilliant signs here that you see off to the side of the road. And I just love the way the brilliance of those colors, the unexpected happening of those colors, punctuates the landscape here and provides a kind of counterpoint to that twilight sky that is beginning to develop there in the distance. And off in the distance, you see this beautiful kind of an ultramarine blue landscape beginning to take on that wonderful hue as the night is coming on. And that is the direction of the so-called hill country in Texas. So it has that kind of rolling quality about it. During the reception that we had when the show opened, it was great fun to talk to people about this painting. One of my favorite questions for folks was, do you have any idea where this painting actually is located? And I was telling folks, you go out the door of the gallery, take a right, just walk a few yards down alongside the studio building and out into a parking lot. And if you look east of there, just across a little body of water, that's the tail end of Farm Pond, you will see this same site. Through these bare trees, you can see the lights in stores that run along Route 135. And I loved that effect with the lights coming on over there and reflecting off some of the water in Farm Pond. Another thing that was great fun was to talk about this particular painting of just a rooftop in the Allston area of Boston. And one of the things that people found quite fascinating is to see not only the finished painting, but I also had on view the working drawing that I did in preparation for doing the painting itself. And in fact, when I did the drawing, I was quite fond of it, and almost felt that, well, having done that, maybe that's enough. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, no, I really did want to see it larger, to give you a little more of a physical sense of the space involved in the scene, and also to give you an opportunity to see some of the color ideas that I had in my mind in the process of developing the painting. And so they're sort of related, but I've also made a few changes in editing, have edited a few things in the process of going from the original drawing to the painting itself.
Thank you for joining us for this special presentation of Sightlines. In the coming months, Roy will be participating in an exhibition at Alper's Fine Art, which runs from January 15th to March 2nd, with a reception on January 25th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The gallery is located at 96 Main Street in Andover. His work will also be featured at another show at Fountain Street Fine Art, which runs from January 30th to March 2nd. A public reception will be held on February 8th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Roy's work is represented by Fountain Street Fine Art and the Copley Society of Art, and he welcomes visitors by appointment. For more information about Roy and his work, please visit his website at perkinsonpaintings.com. We hope you've enjoyed this locally produced presentation of Sightlines.